My name is Ethan Carter. I was 18 the summer my grandmother handed me a paintbrush and told me to follow the tide lines while skipping her own dinner so I wouldn't go hungry. But what still haunts me, what burns more than anything, was the way my dad watched her do it and said nothing. He just patted my shoulder and told me to be grateful. Like that made it okay. What he didn't know was the promise I made that summer was bigger than either of them imagined. And when the time came, I kept it, even if it meant turning my back on him. Can someone tell me, how does a woman give everything she has and still end up cast aside like she's nothing? It started with the sound of seagulls slicing through the Oregon morning. The porch railing at Grandma Eleanor's cottage was cool beneath my forearms, still damp from the dawn mist. Beyond the garden, waves crashed against the cliffs, slow and steady like her breath when she slept. She always left the window open even when it rained. The air smelled like lavender and salt water and oil paint. Eleanor had this thing where she'd mix colors outside before breakfast, humming low, something between a lullaby and a prayer. That morning, she handed me a canvas and pointed toward the surf. See where the ocean changes color? That's where you start. Always start with what moves. I remember looking at her hands, veiny, weathered, steady. Hands that had cradled newborns and stitched wounds in that small hospital just down the road. Hands that had also scrubbed our laundry in a cracked porcelain sink when Dad forgot to fix the washing machine. Again. Her laugh came easy then, like she'd tucked every bad thing behind her and only held on to the sun. I wish I could say I noticed it that day, how her cheeks had thinned or how her knees cracked louder when she stood. But I didn't. Back then, I thought she was unbreakable. Later that afternoon, she made lemon tea and sat with me on the porch swing, knees covered with an old knit throw, feet bare against the wood. The sun caught in her gray hair like threads of silver. "You'll do something big someday, Ethan," she said, stirring her cup slowly. "I just know it," I smiled, trying to match her warmth. "You say that every year. And every year I mean it." I looked out at the sea, unsure what to say next. The paint on my canvas was still wet, streaked with too much blue. I hadn't quite figured out how to blend the white caps. Then I noticed it, how her eyes flicked toward the living room window, where a small drawer sat locked inside an antique desk. She didn't say anything, just went quiet for a moment, like something inside her shifted. "You ever wonder," she said softly, "why some people stay and others leave the second they get what they want?" Her voice barely touched the air. It wasn't a question meant to be answered. I didn't ask what she meant. I just watched as she finished her tea and gently touched the key around her neck, the one I'd never seen her take off. That night, I passed the living room and noticed her savings jar. It always sat on top of the bookshelf, a wide mason jar stuffed with crisp bills and coins that sparkled in the lamplight. I'd never seen her spend from it, not even once. Not for herself, not even when she skipped breakfast and said she wasn't hungry. But I saw her watching me eat. That quiet kind of hunger, never for food. She'd saved every penny from those long night shifts at Willow Creek General, patching up fishermen and delivery drivers. Every burn, every cut, every emergency call, it all lived in that jar. "Grandma," I asked the next morning, "why don't you use your savings? You could take a trip, see something new." She smiled without turning. "This cottage is all the view I need, sweetheart." But I saw her glance at the drawer again. Quick, like muscle memory. I told myself it was nothing, just old furniture and old habits. A week later, Dad called. "Eleanor's birthday's coming up," he said. "Thought we'd plan something big this year." I almost dropped my phone. "Like what?" "A family trip, all of us. She deserves it." I paused. It wasn't like him at all, but I wanted to believe it. For once, I wanted to think maybe he cared. He hung up without waiting for my response. That evening, Eleanor made grilled cheese and tomato soup. We ate on the porch again, the sky streaked purple over the ocean. "I think your dad wants to do something special," I said, watching her closely. Her hand paused over her plate, just for a second. Then she nodded. "He always did have big ideas." I caught it then, the flicker in her expression, hope, and something else. Fear? Later that night, I walked past the living room again. The drawer. It was slightly open. Inside, I saw the edge of an envelope, thick, yellowed, with handwriting that looked familiar. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Something about it felt like crossing a line. Instead, I went back to my room and lay awake, listening to the waves crashing in the dark, each one louder than the last. I didn't know then what was coming. I didn't know that envelope would be the fuse, or that the same hands that taught me to paint would soon tremble not with age, but betrayal. 3 months later, summer was fading, and the air in Willow Creek had cooled just enough to carry a whisper of fall. The lavender blooms were thinning out. The sea looked more silver than blue, and inside Eleanor's cottage, the light hung low and golden, like a memory caught in a jar. I was in the kitchen peeling apples when Dad's truck pulled into the gravel drive. The tires crunched like broken glass. He rarely visited, only when he wanted something. He didn't knock, just walked in like it was still his house. "Eleanor?" he called out, his voice too loud for the quiet. She emerged from her room, tucking a lock of silver hair behind her ear. She wore the sweater I bought her last Christmas, faded and soft at the elbows. "There you are," he said, and his smile looked tight. "We've been talking. Me, Linda, Claire, and Mark. And we think it's time for something good." Eleanor glanced at me. Her lips pressed into that soft, polite line she wore when she was bracing herself. "We're taking a family trip," he said, clapping his hands once. "Hawaii, 1 week, oceanfront resort, meals included. You, me, everyone." He paused like he was waiting for applause. Eleanor didn't speak. She just looked at him, eyes unreadable. Then he added, "Your savings make it possible." My knife slipped against the apple's skin. I felt the sting before I saw the blood. She blinked. "What? I mean, you've always wanted us together again, right?" he said quickly, laughing too easily. "This makes it happen." She reached for the back of the chair, steadying herself. I wrapped my finger in a paper towel, watching her, my gut twisting. Something in her posture, how her shoulders lowered slightly, felt off. Not surrender, resignation. He went on, painting it like a dream. Luau dinners, sunset cruises, snorkeling with sea turtles. I barely heard him. Eleanor nodded slowly, but her eyes weren't on him. They drifted to the window, toward the sea, then toward that same locked drawer. After he left, she sat at the kitchen table, silent. The wind tapped the glass like it was trying to warn us. "Are you okay?" I asked. She didn't answer, just traced her finger around the rim of her teacup over and over until the steam disappeared. Later that week, Aunt Claire and Uncle Mark arrived, all smiles and perfumed hugs. Claire wore new heels, clicking across the cottage floor like they didn't belong. Mark barely looked up from his phone. "Big trip, Ethan," Claire chirped. "Aren't you excited for Eleanor?" "She deserves this," Mark added, not bothering to look at her. I stood beside Grandma, my hand resting on the back of her chair. She hadn't said yes. Not really, but they acted like she had. That evening, I overheard them talking on the porch while I was taking out the trash. Claire's voice was low but sharp. "Once we secure the transfer, it's all set. Don't let her back out." "Mark said he'd talk to the bank," Linda added. "Make it look routine." I froze in the shadows, the trash bag dangling from my hand. I suddenly felt 12 again, overhearing things I didn't understand, but knowing deep down they were wrong. "She's sentimental," Claire said. "Play into that. Say it's a family thing. Guilt always works." Their laughter made my skin crawl. Back inside, Eleanor was folding a dish towel, her hands moving slowly. "You okay, Grandma?" She nodded without looking up. "Just tired." But her hands trembled. The next morning, Dad returned with a manila folder and placed it on the table like it was sacred. "Here's everything," he said. "Flight details, hotel confirmations, itinerary. First class for you, Mom." He winked at me like we were in on something together. Eleanor opened the folder, scanning the pages. Her eyes lingered longer than necessary. I stepped behind her and caught a glimpse. Her name wasn't on the passenger list. Neither was mine. I felt my jaw tighten. My voice caught in my throat. She closed the folder gently and placed it on the counter. "Thank you," she whispered. "It looks lovely." Dad grinned. "We leave in 3 weeks. Better start packing." That night, after everyone left, I sat on the floor in the hallway, knees drawn up, watching the soft light under Eleanor's bedroom door. I heard the creak of the floorboards, her footsteps, then silence. I rose quietly, drawn by something I couldn't explain. The living room was empty, but the antique desk was open, the drawer. It wasn't locked anymore, just slightly ajar. A single corner of yellowed paper peeked out like a whisper trying to be heard. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned and looked at the mason jar on the bookshelf. It was gone. In its place sat a small porcelain bowl, empty. No coins, no bills, just dust. I walked to the window and looked out into the night. The waves were louder now, crashing harder like they were trying to tell me something. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Eleanor made breakfast. Oatmeal and half a banana. I asked her if she wanted toast, eggs, anything else. She shook her head. "This is enough." She smiled, but her hands stayed in her lap. I wanted to scream, to drag Dad back and force him to explain, to Claire, to Mark, to all of them. But all I could do was watch her spoon oatmeal slowly into her mouth like it tasted like ash. Something in her had shifted. Not broken, but buried. I didn't know what they'd done yet, not fully, but I felt it in my bones. They were planning something, and Eleanor, she already knew. The day we were supposed to leave for Hawaii started before the sun did. I loaded Eleanor's suitcase into the trunk of my dad's SUV, an old maroon thing with squeaky shocks and a new coat of wax that smelled like chemicals and desperation. The wheels crunched over the gravel as we pulled out of the driveway. She sat beside me in the back seat, her purse clutched to her chest like armor. "Excited, Grandma?" I asked, forcing lightness into my voice. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a long time since I traveled anywhere." I looked down at her shoes, sturdy beige sneakers with fresh laces she'd bought just for the trip. The tag was still tucked inside the left tongue. She'd barely touched her breakfast. The drive to Portland International was quiet. My father talked the whole time, about weather, traffic, TSA lines, anything except the woman sitting in silence behind him. Mom nodded, laughed where she was supposed to. I sat still, heart pounding like it already knew. When we pulled into the drop-off lane, Aunt Claire and Uncle Mark were already there, their kids scrolling their phones like zombies in overpriced hoodies. Claire's lips smacked with red lipstick, a little too bright for a 7 a.m. flight. "Eleanor!" she cooed, offering a brief hug that didn't make contact. Mark gave a shallow nod, like he was clocking in for a shift. We shuffled into the terminal, the fluorescent lights washing everything in dull yellow. Suitcases rolled like thunder across the tiled floor. The smell of burnt coffee and airport pretzels filled the air. My grandma looked around in wonder, like it was her first time flying. Maybe it was. I wanted to see her happy, but something inside me clenched. The check-in counter buzzed with chatter. Dad stepped up first, handing the agent a thick folder of printed confirmations. Behind me, Eleanor adjusted her scarf. Her hands trembled just slightly, fingertips white from how tightly she held her boarding pass. Except she didn't have one. My stomach turned. I looked at Dad. He was whispering with the clerk, brows knit like something was off. Mom hovered behind him, arms crossed. Then he turned to me and motioned for me to come over. I knew before he opened his mouth. "Ethan," he said under his breath, eyes flicking toward Grandma. "There's a mistake with the booking. Her ticket didn't go through." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He sighed, rubbing his temples like this was all so inconvenient. "There was an error, maybe in the system. I need you to tell her she can't come." I blinked. "Tell her yourself." "She trusts you," he said, voice low. "She'll take it better from you." I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. His face was calm, cold, like this was a business meeting, not a family trip funded by her life savings. Behind us, Claire giggled at something on her phone. Mark talked to the kids about luggage tags. Nobody looked our way. I walked back to Eleanor. "Is everything okay?" she asked, eyes soft but wary. I knelt beside her, hands shaking. "There's an issue," I said, swallowing hard. "They say your ticket isn't confirmed. Something about a system error." Her lips parted, confused. "But I paid. I gave—" She stopped. I didn't say anything. She looked past me, toward Dad. He wasn't looking at her. He was talking to the clerk again, like none of this mattered. She straightened her spine. "Well," she whispered, "maybe I'll take the next flight." My throat tightened. Grandma, It's okay, sweetheart, she smiled gently. I'm old. Maybe it's better I don't fly so far. Behind us, Claire called out, Boarding group's been announced! Eleanor stepped away from the counter, her suitcase still beside her. Dad didn't look back. Neither did Mom. Claire waved once, then turned away. Mark pulled his rolling bag without a word. The kids didn't even glance up. I watched them disappear into the crowd like strangers. She stood still, lips pressed tight, eyes glassy but unbroken. I can get you a ticket, I said suddenly. I'll buy one right now, we'll go together. But she shook her head. No, Ethan, they don't want me there. My hands balled into fists. Then I'm not going either. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Don't be foolish. You've been looking forward to this. No, I said, loud enough to turn a few heads. I was looking forward to seeing you happy. This isn't that. Her eyes welled up, and this time, she didn't blink it away. Dad turned once before entering security. His eyes met mine for a second. Then he looked away. They left us standing there. Just left us. I pulled her suitcase toward the exit, one hand on her back. The drive back to Willow Creek was silent. She stared out the window, her scarf loose now, hair gently unraveling in the breeze. Halfway home, she spoke. Maybe I'm too old. Too much trouble. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. No, they're just cruel. She nodded like she didn't believe me. That evening, she sat on the porch in her cardigan, staring at the sea. I brought her tea. She didn't drink it. Do you think I embarrassed them? She asked. My chest hurt. You're the only decent one among them. She exhaled, long and quiet. The air smelled like lavender again, but the scent felt thinner now, like it was fading. Later that night, I passed through the living room and paused. The drawer was wide open. The envelope inside it had been moved. My name was written on the front, just 2 words, for Ethan. I didn't open it, not yet, but I sat on the floor next to that drawer, holding it in my hands as she slept in the next room. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I was done pretending we were a family. The morning after the airport, something about the cottage felt wrong, off balance, like the floorboards were holding their breath. Eleanor didn't get up for her usual tea. I found her still in bed, lying stiff beneath the quilt, her eyes open, focused on nothing. A silence wrapped around her that no hug or word could pierce. I sat beside her and gently placed the envelope on the nightstand, the one that read, for Ethan. I hadn't opened it. I didn't need to yet. Some things sit heavier in the heart when they're still secrets. I should have known, she whispered. I should have seen it coming. Her voice was flat, like someone who'd been robbed of even the strength to grieve. She looked smaller than she had just days ago. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time, not just as Grandma, the invincible nurse with warm cookies and sea stories, but as a woman who'd been wounded deeply, and more than once. I helped her sit up, made oatmeal, even though she barely touched it. I want to talk to them, I said. She looked at me like I was a kid trying to fix a cracked dam with tape. They won't care. Maybe not, I said, but I need to know why. That afternoon I called Aunt Claire. She answered on the second ring. Oh, Ethan, she said, like we were picking up a normal conversation. We were wondering when you'd call. Why did you leave her? My voice was sharp, no build-up, a pause, then a fake sigh. It wasn't like that. She stood there with her suitcase, watching you walk away. Claire didn't respond. She gave you everything, I continued, and you tossed her aside like she didn't matter. Another pause. Then her voice dropped, colder. Look, Ethan, your grandma's choices aren't your burden. She insisted on giving the money. We didn't force her. Then why didn't she have a seat on the plane? A low laugh. You're young. You don't understand how family works when money's involved. My fingers tightened around the phone. She's not some investment portfolio, Claire. She's a human being. Silence. Then, as if she was switching tones, Claire said, You really want to know why she's not part of this trip? I didn't answer. She's a liability, Ethan. Always has been. She saved money, sure, but never enough. We needed the full amount up front to secure what matters. What do you mean, secure? Claire scoffed. There's more at stake than a vacation. You think this is about Mai Tais and beach chairs? My pulse quickened. There's an inheritance involved from a relative on Mark's side. Big land deal, but they won't release the funds unless our family assets look stable. Clean. We couldn't afford to have Eleanor asking questions or making things messy. I stood frozen in the kitchen, my breath shallow. She was never going to Hawaii, was she? No, she said flatly. She was never part of the plan. That sentence, so final, so cruel, cut through me like a knife. I hope you can live with that, I said. Don't act righteous, Claire snapped. You think standing beside her makes you a hero? You're just a kid clinging to a fantasy. Grow up. She hung up. The silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I walked to Eleanor's room. She sat by the window now, staring at the sea, her hands folded in her lap. What did she say? She asked. I knelt beside her. It wasn't about the trip. She closed her eyes. It was about money, land, image. They saw you as a liability. Her jaw twitched, just slightly, but her voice was steady. I raised that girl, fed her when her parents left her with me for whole summers, paid for her braces, and this is who she became. She stood slowly, walked to the kitchen. The light through the window made her silver hair shimmer, but her shadow stretched long across the floor. I followed. As she poured herself a glass of water, I said, "What were they trying to protect? What's this inheritance?" She paused mid-pour. The water line shook just slightly. "There's land," she said. "Old property upstate. Belonged to your great-uncle's family. No one's touched it in decades." "Did you know they were using you?" She nodded. I suspected, but I kept hoping I was wrong. She turned to me, eyes red but dry. I wanted to believe they could change. I stared at her, heart aching. "You still do, don't you?" She didn't answer. That night, Dad showed up. His truck headlights flared through the window just after 9 p.m. I opened the door before he could knock. He stepped inside like he owned the place. "Where is she?" he asked. I blocked his path. "Why are you here?" "To fix things." My laugh came out hollow. "Fix what? The part where you conned your mother out of $27K and dumped her at an airport?" His eyes darkened. "Watch your mouth." I didn't flinch. "Or what? You'll disown me like you did her?" He moved closer, but I didn't move. "Ethan, I'm warning you. She deserves to know everything." He sneered. "She doesn't need the stress. Her heart can't handle it." "She handled raising you," I said. "She'll survive this too." His fists clenched. "I don't need your lectures." "Then get out of her house." He took one step back, jaw tight. Then his voice softened in that fake way I'd learned to recognize. "You think you know what's going on? You don't. You think your grandmother's some saint? She's not innocent in all this." "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Ask her about the letter in the drawer." And with that, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, breathing hard, hands shaking. Back in the living room, I pulled open the drawer again. That envelope, still sealed. For Ethan. I broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter and an old, faded document. The letter was short, just one line. "If you're reading this, they've already betrayed me. But I wasn't always innocent either. Look closely at the deed." I unfolded the second page. It was a land deed. Signed. But the signature wasn't hers. And someone had tried to cover the original with correction fluid. Who was it? And why had she kept it hidden? The next morning, fog clung to the windows like it didn't want to let go. I stared at the land deed again, my finger brushing the edge where the correction fluid had dried in an uneven patch. Whoever tried to hide that signature didn't expect someone to look twice. Eleanor sat on the porch, wrapped in her cardigan, eyes distant, as if she were watching the ocean for something that never came. I'd been silent for too long, thinking too long. It was time to act. I searched online, hands trembling slightly until I found it. Adult Protective Services of Oregon. A number. A name. Officer Daniel Hayes. The line rang 4 times before a calm, steady voice answered. "This is Officer Hayes." I cleared my throat. "Hi, my name's Ethan Carter. I need to report something." "Okay," he said slowly. "Take your time." I told him everything. My family's manipulation, the missing ticket, the $27,000 transfer, and now the doctored deed. His voice didn't change, but I could feel the shift. "This is financial exploitation," he said, "of a dependent elder. We take this seriously." He asked questions, dates, names, account numbers. I gave him what I could. Then he asked the hardest one, "Does she know you're calling?" I looked out at Eleanor, sipping cold tea like it still had warmth in it. "No," I said, "but she trusts me." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'll come by tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was bracing for something. I woke up just after dawn and found Eleanor already in the garden, plucking weeds with bare fingers, dirt under her nails. "You're up early," I said. She didn't look up. "Couldn't sleep. Bad dreams." I crouched beside her. "Do you remember who signed that deed?" She paused. Her hand hovered above the soil. I didn't want to believe it. "Believe what?" She finally met my eyes. "That Robert forged it. Your father." My throat tightened. "You think he signed your name?" She nodded once. "It's not the first time he's used my trust against me." The pain in her voice was quiet, but sharp. A paper cut to the soul. Later that afternoon, Officer Hayes pulled up in a plain silver sedan. He stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, with a notepad in one hand and tired eyes that had probably seen too many stories like ours. Inside, he asked Eleanor gently if she was comfortable talking. She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. Her voice was even, measured. "I gave them the money because I wanted to believe. Maybe this time would be different." Hayes took notes, asked about the transaction, about the ticket, the trip, her relationship with my father. She answered every question, her voice gaining strength with each word. I sat across from them, silent but alert, my hands gripping the edge of the armrest. Then I handed him the copy of the deed. He scanned it, his brow furrowing. This correction fluid, this wasn't done professionally. "Can it be traced?" I asked. "It's possible. We'll need to get the original from the county records, but if someone forged her signature, that's a criminal offense." Eleanor inhaled sharply, but didn't flinch. After an hour, Hayes stood and thanked her. "We're opening a case," he said. "We'll contact your son and the others involved, but I want you both to be prepared. They may retaliate." I walked him out to the porch. "What do you mean by retaliate?" He looked over his shoulder, voice low. "They'll try to discredit you, maybe even threaten you. I'm not backing down." He nodded. "Good, because this might get worse before it gets better." As he drove off, a breeze picked up, shaking the marigolds by the porch. I watched until his car disappeared. That evening I stayed close, cooked dinner, double-checked the locks. Eleanor didn't talk much, but when I brought her soup, she squeezed my hand gently. "You did the right thing," she said. I wish that comforted me. But around midnight I saw headlights outside, a car idling across the street, windows tinted, engine humming like a warning. I stood by the curtain holding my breath. It didn't move, didn't flash lights, just watched. I didn't tell Eleanor, not yet. The next morning, I checked the bank. With Eleanor's permission, we printed the statements showing the $27K transfer. Every dollar moved into Robert's account just weeks before the trip. The teller, Martha, had known Eleanor for years. Her jaw tightened as she looked at the records. "This is theft," she muttered, "plain and simple." She helped us organize the paperwork, eyes narrowed like she was memorizing every figure. "I'll cooperate if needed," she said. That afternoon I emailed everything to Officer Hayes. Statements, the scanned deed, even the itinerary Dad had given Eleanor with her name missing. He called back within an hour. "You've done well, Ethan," he said. "We're building a case." But I could tell from his tone, this was far from over. That night I pulled the shades tight and double-locked the front door. As I passed the window, I looked out again. The car was back, same one, no plates visible. This time, it backed up slowly as soon as I stared at it, like it wanted me to know it saw me too. Who was inside? Someone Dad sent? Or something worse? I stood in the dark, the room lit only by the faint glow from the oven clock. Something deep inside told me they weren't going to let this go quietly. The sky over Willow Creek turned the color of wet concrete by morning, and a fine mist coated the windows, softening everything outside into a blur. I stared through the glass, tracing a finger along the condensation, trying to ignore the pressure building in my chest. Eleanor sat across from me at the kitchen table, slowly spooning sugar into her tea. Her movements were precise, too precise, like she was trying not to break apart. "You didn't sleep," she said without looking up. "No," I answered. "You didn't either." She nodded faintly, then stared into her cup like it held the answers we couldn't find in each other's faces. There were still questions I hadn't asked, pieces that didn't make sense. The car outside, the forged deed, and that signature, the one that didn't belong to her, but someone went through the trouble of hiding. But there was one thing I couldn't get out of my head, what Dad said before he left. Ask her about the letter in the drawer. That same drawer had held the envelope for me, but there was nothing else in it now, nothing obvious. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. While Eleanor napped on the couch that afternoon, I climbed up into the attic. It had been years since anyone had touched this space. The smell hit me first: dust, pine wood, and the faint musk of old paper. A single bulb hung low from the ceiling, casting a dim circle of yellow light that barely reached the corners. Boxes lined the walls, some cracked, others taped shut. I opened one marked Robert College and found photo albums, a broken calculator, and a faded acceptance letter to Oregon State. Nothing useful. But in a smaller box tucked behind an old sewing machine, I found it, an envelope, brittle and creased, addressed in shaky cursive, to Eleanor Carter, Estate Inquiry. The postmark was from nearly 15 years ago. No return address, just a law office's stamp from Eugene, Oregon. I sat on the attic floor, knees drawn up, the letter trembling in my hands. The air felt too still, like the whole house was holding its breath. Inside was a single typed page, yellowed at the edges. It referenced a dispute regarding land, an old property once belonging to Eleanor's late brother. The document stated that, pending Eleanor's verification of familial ties and agreement, she was next in line for a transfer of ownership. But the oddest part, the last paragraph had been underlined in blue ink. If no confirmation is received within 60 days, the deed shall be reassigned to the next qualifying relative, Mark W. Carter. Mark, Uncle Mark. I read the name again, and then again. Why hadn't she ever mentioned this? Back downstairs, Eleanor was still sleeping. Her hand clutched the edge of the throw blanket. Her lips moved faintly like she was talking to someone in a dream. I sat beside her, waiting until her eyes fluttered open. "Grandma," I said softly, "do you remember a letter from a law office in Eugene?" Her eyes snapped fully open. She stared at me, then slowly sat up. "The attic," she murmured. "You found it." I handed her the letter. She unfolded it slowly, like she already knew what it said. "They sent that after Michael died," she said. "He had no kids, just me, Mark, and Claire in the will, but your father said it was nothing, that they'd take care of the paperwork." "Did you sign anything?" "No, I never replied. I didn't want the land. It reminded me too much of Michael." I leaned closer. "But if you didn't respond, and Mark was the next in line..." Her eyes widened. "Then he would have inherited it." I nodded. "Unless they forged your confirmation." She looked away, lips trembling. "They didn't just steal from me, they erased me." Silence settled between us, and then I asked what had been gnawing at me since the day at the airport. "Why didn't you fight them earlier?" Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to believe my own children could do this. I thought, if I loved them hard enough, they'd remember who they used to be." She didn't cry, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I reached over, covering hers with mine. "We're not done yet." That night I scanned the letter and sent it to Officer Hayes. A few hours later, he called back. "This changes everything," he said. "If they filed a false claim or forged your grandmother's response, we're looking at more than financial abuse. This would fall under fraud and perjury." My heart pounded in my chest. "Can you trace it?" "I've already contacted the clerk's office in Eugene. If they submitted documents in Eleanor's name without her signature, we'll find them." As I hung up, I noticed movement outside. I moved to the window and parted the blinds. The car was there again, same one. But this time it wasn't just parked. A man stepped out. He didn't come to the door, didn't ring the bell. He just stood at the edge of our yard, watching the house, watching me. The porch light flickered. I stepped outside slowly, trying not to show how fast my heart was beating. The man turned and got back in the car. Then it rolled away. I didn't get a license plate. Back inside, Eleanor looked up. Was it them? I don't know, I said, but someone doesn't want us digging. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat by the window with the letter in my lap, one lamp on, my eyes scanning the dark street for any sign of that car again, because now I knew. This wasn't just about $27,000. They were hiding something bigger, and someone was willing to watch us closely to make sure we didn't find it. By the time Saturday rolled around, the fog in Willow Creek hadn't lifted. It pressed against the cottage windows like a silent warning. I'd barely slept, and Eleanor wasn't eating again. Her spoon clinked against her teacup, slow, methodical. She didn't look up. I'm going to see him, I said. She didn't ask who. She just nodded. I didn't tell her I was bringing the letter, the one from the lawyer's office in Eugene, the land transfer, the part that underlined Uncle Mark's name like a smoking gun. I tucked it into my backpack with the photocopied deed, the bank statement, and all the anger I'd been swallowing for weeks. Dad's house sat at the edge of town, a 2-story place with a manicured lawn and shutters painted the exact shade of self-delusion. I rang the doorbell once. No answer. Then again, harder. The door flew open. Dad stood there, wearing a pressed shirt and holding a half-eaten apple like I was interrupting his peace. "Ethan," he said, surprised but not friendly, "this isn't a good time." I shoved the door wider and walked in. "We need to talk." He let out a sigh and followed me into the living room. Mom was there too, standing near the fireplace like she'd just stepped into the middle of something she couldn't escape from. "What is this?" Dad asked, arms crossed. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. "It's evidence." He flipped through it casually, like it was junk mail, then stopped. "The letter," I said, "from the estate lawyer. You never gave it to her." He didn't answer. "You told them she confirmed the transfer. She didn't." He set the paper down slowly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough. Mark's name was next. But you needed Eleanor out of the way to make it clean, so you erased her." Mom shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes darted to Dad, then to the floor. "It wasn't like that," she said softly. I turned to her. "Then tell me how it was." She didn't speak. Dad's jaw clenched. "We did what was best for the family. That land was tied up in debt. We needed to move quickly." "You stole from her," I said. "You lied. You left her standing at an airport like garbage." He stepped closer, voice sharp. "Watch it." "No," I snapped. "You watch it. She gave everything to this family. She sacrificed her life so you could have yours. And this is how you repay her?" His voice dropped lower. "You think you're some hero, Ethan? You don't understand the weight of real decisions, of keeping a family afloat." "You mean covering your ass?" I asked. "So Claire could get her name on a beach property deed, and Mark could weasel into an inheritance?" He lunged forward, grabbing my shoulder. "You think you can talk to me like that in my house?" I pulled back, heart hammering. "Don't touch me!" Mom stepped between us, her voice trembling. "Stop, please!" He let go, slowly. "You've crossed a line, son," he muttered. "I won't warn you again." I stared at him. His eyes were glassy, not with guilt, but with rage, control slipping. "Officer Hayes is investigating," I said. "If you forged anything, they'll find out." He didn't flinch, but Mom paled. "I warned her," she whispered, more to herself than me. "I told her not to sign, that it wasn't right." I froze. "What?" She looked up. "The bank transfer. Eleanor's account. He had her write a check after showing her fake flight reservations. Said the money would go toward the family's group booking. He even made me call her to convince her it was all real." I stared at her, and for a second, I saw someone else behind her eyes. Someone drowning in quiet guilt. "Why didn't you stop him?" Her voice broke. "Because I didn't think she'd go through with it. I thought she'd back out. I never imagined he'd actually leave her behind." Dad's glare could have burned through glass. "You've said enough," he snapped, but it was already too late. I backed toward the door. You both should get lawyers." As I turned to leave, his voice followed me. "If you go through with this, Ethan, you're no longer my son." I didn't look back. The door slammed behind me like a closing verdict. Outside, the sky had darkened. Not just overcast, but heavy, pregnant with storm. As I stepped into the driveway, a car pulled up slowly. Uncle Mark. He rolled down the window, the fake smile already in place. "Hey, Ethan, we should talk." My chest tightened. "Now's not a good time." "It's about the land," he said. "I think there's been some confusion." I stepped closer. "You forged her name." His eyes flicked down. "I was told she signed it. I didn't question it." "Liar." "I have my own problems," he said. "They pressured me. Robert, Claire, there's more going on than you know." I leaned down to his window. "Then start talking." He hesitated, then, "Meet me at the bluff tomorrow, near the old ranger station, noon." "Why not now?" "Because they're watching," he whispered. "And if they know I told you?" He stopped, then drove off. I watched the taillights disappear around the bend. I stood there a long time, wind picking up around me. They were turning on each other, which meant something bigger was about to break. The next morning, Willow Creek was wrapped in a soft drizzle, the kind that didn't soak you outright but lingered on your skin like a warning. I left Eleanor a note by her tea mug, just 4 words: "I'll be back soon." Then I zipped my hoodie, slipped the scanned deed into my backpack again, and headed out on foot toward the old ranger station. I didn't want the car to be seen, not today. The trail wound through mossy pines slick with rain. Every step squelched slightly beneath my shoes. The sky hung low, gray and swollen. It felt like the earth was holding something in, just like all of us. When I reached the bluff, Mark was already there, leaning against his truck, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He looked older than I remembered, softer in some ways, more wrinkled around the eyes, but it didn't make him feel less dangerous. "Didn't think you'd show," he said, flicking ash onto the wet gravel. "You said you had something to tell me." He nodded, then took a long drag before tossing the cigarette and grinding it under his heel. "They forced my hand," he said. "Robert and Claire. I didn't want any of this, but I was deep in it before I even realized what was happening." "Deep in what?" He glanced at the woods as if checking for ears. "Your grandma's signature, on the land deed. That wasn't her." "I know. I forged it." There it was, no dancing around it, no weak denial. I waited for a flicker of shame. I didn't see any. "She didn't even know the land existed," he went on. "Robert found the records after Michael died, told me it was just sitting there, that we could get ahead if we moved fast. So you just pretended she said yes." He shrugged. "He said she'd never claim it, said she didn't even want it. We just needed a name to transfer it cleanly." I stared at him, blood hot behind my ears. "You erased her. For what? Some payout?" He flinched, just barely. "It was more than a payout. That land's worth 6 figures now. Maybe more. The buyers overseas cash up front." My stomach twisted. So this wasn't just about a vacation. Mark's eyes met mine. It never was. I stepped closer. "And the car outside our house? The guy watching us?" His mouth twitched. "That's not from me, that's Claire. She's scared. Thinks you'll tank the deal." "She should be scared." He looked down. "I wanted out, Ethan. That's why I called you. I'm not like them." I didn't say anything, because I wasn't sure I believed him. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a flash drive. "What's this?" "Copies of the original paperwork, emails, wire transfers, stuff I wasn't supposed to keep." "Why give this to me?" "Because I want out, and because your grandmother, she deserves better." He turned to leave, but I couldn't let him walk away that easy. "Do you regret it?" He stopped. Rain dripped from his collar. "I regret getting caught." That told me everything. Back at the cottage, Eleanor was on the porch again, eyes locked on the garden like she was trying to remember something important. I sat beside her and placed the flash drive between us. "Mark talked." She didn't flinch. "He admitted to forging the signature, said Robert convinced him. Claire's got someone watching the house." Still, no reaction. But then she whispered, "I trusted all of them, for so long." I reached for her hand. "They're going to lose everything, I promise you that." Her grip tightened slightly, then relaxed. "I used to think justice was a quiet thing," she said. "Now I know it has to be loud." That night, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Files loaded slowly. PDFs of wire transfers, scanned contracts, emails with subject lines like "Final Deed Draft" and "Overseas Buyer Confirmed." But one folder stopped me cold. It was labeled Insurance. Inside were pictures, scans of her ID, banking info, even her old will. Things they'd taken without her knowing. And one email sent from Robert's personal account to Claire and Mark. Subject, "If she resists." It was dated 2 weeks before the airport. The body said, "She won't resist, but if she does, Ethan's naive enough to believe her. Use that if you have to." I sat back, stunned. They hadn't just betrayed her. They'd planned to use me too, to cover their tracks. My throat tightened as I scrolled further. One attachment, a draft of a legal revocation of Eleanor's rights as an heir, never submitted but signed, forged. I forwarded it all to Officer Hayes without a second thought. But the moment I hit send, I heard it. A soft knock at the front door, 3 short taps. I froze. The porch light was out. Eleanor was already asleep. Another knock, this time slower, almost deliberate. I rose, heart thudding against my ribs, and moved to the door, but I didn't open it. I looked through the peephole. Nobody, just darkness. I stepped back slowly, but something slid under the door, a folded piece of paper. I waited a beat, then picked it up. One sentence printed in all caps, "Stop now or someone else gets hurt." No signature, just a smudge of something dark in the corner. I didn't tell Eleanor, not yet, but I took the note into the kitchen, sat down under the hum of the overhead light, and stared at it for a long time. Because now, this wasn't just fraud. It was a threat, and I had no idea who would be next. For 3 nights after the threat note arrived, I didn't sleep right. Every creak in the floorboards felt louder. Every gust of wind against the cottage window sent a chill down my spine. I moved the chair from the dining room to the living room and slept there, facing the door, flashlight in one hand, a baseball bat in the other. But nothing came. The 4th night, Eleanor caught me nodding off beside the cold fireplace, the blanket half slipping off my shoulder. "You don't have to protect me, Ethan," she whispered. But I did, because someone was out there, watching, waiting. And now we both knew it. That morning, I walked Eleanor to the town's tiny grocery store. It was something we used to do every Saturday. Before the betrayal, before the silence, she insisted on carrying her own basket. I didn't argue, I just stayed close. The aisles smelled like citrus cleaner and overripe bananas. Familiar, safe almost. Until I saw it again. That same black car, parked across the street. Engine off, windows tinted. But this time, I caught a glimpse, just a flash, of a man's face behind the wheel. Dark hair, hat low, no expression. He saw me watching and didn't flinch. Eleanor squeezed my arm as we left the store, but I could feel the tremble in her grip. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. They weren't just watching anymore. They were following. That night, I walked the perimeter of the house twice before locking up. Set the bat by the door. My phone buzzed once. Officer Hayes. We got the official records from Eugene. There's a match. The forged doc was used to claim ownership. We're preparing to move forward. Keep your head down. I texted back. Someone left a threat note, still watching the house. He replied immediately. Stay put. We'll move soon. Be careful. But I wasn't the only one feeling it. Later that evening, Eleanor sat at the table with a photo album in her lap, one she hadn't opened in years. "Do you remember when we visited the coast when you were 7? She asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I said. "You let me pick a rock from the tide pool, said it would bring luck." She smiled faintly. "It didn't, did it?" "I kept it anyway." She turned a page. Her hands shook a little, the way they always did when her emotions were close to the surface. "I don't understand how they became this way," she said softly. "You raised them right," I whispered. She closed the album. "Then maybe it's not about how you're raised." That stuck with me. That night, I decided to make a list of every name, every place, every piece of evidence we had. The forged deed, the bank records, the flash drive, the surveillance, the witness statements, Mark's confession, and the threats. I needed to know what I was dealing with, needed to stay one step ahead. Around midnight, the wind picked up. The marigolds out front thrashed wildly under the porch light. I stepped out barefoot, the cold slapping me awake. That's when I saw it. Another note. Not slid under the door this time, taped to the mailbox. I pulled it down, hands already trembling. 4 words. Next time, she falls. No signature, just like the last one. But something inside me snapped. I walked back inside, locked every window, turned off every light, and sat down with the note under the kitchen bulb. Eleanor was asleep. I could hear her soft breathing from the other room. I stared at the paper, my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. Who was doing this? Robert? Claire? Or someone else? The next morning, Officer Hayes called. "We're submitting a formal claim. The DA's interested. The paper trail's solid. I need Eleanor's full statement in person." "We'll come in," I said. "Today." We left after lunch. I made Eleanor wear her blue raincoat, the one that made her feel warm even when the air turned bitter. As we drove, I caught another car behind us. Silver. Not black, but it stayed on us for 12 turns, then peeled off. I didn't mention it. "Not yet." At the APS office, Eleanor gave her statement. Hayes listened carefully, nodding as she recalled dates, names, moments, the day Robert came to her with the itinerary, the moment she handed over her savings, the confusion at the airport. When she finished, her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Hayes stood. "You've been brave, Mrs. Carter. We're moving on this." She nodded. As we left, he handed me a sealed folder. "For the court. Don't let it out of your sight." We drove home in silence, and when we pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. The front door was cracked open. I slammed the car into park and leapt out, motioning for Eleanor to stay put. I stepped inside slowly. The living room was ransacked. Cushions overturned, drawers emptied, the cabinet beneath the sink torn open. But nothing was missing, at least nothing obvious, except one thing, the flash drive. Gone. I checked the laptop. Files. Erased. They hadn't come for money. They came for the proof. Eleanor stepped in behind me. I didn't stop her. She looked around, her breath catching, but then her voice was calm, steady. "They're scared." I nodded, which meant we were close. Too close. The house felt colder after the break-in, not because of the weather. It was warm outside, August clinging to summer with a sticky grip, but because something sacred had been breached. Violated. And the silence inside? It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. I swept up the shattered vase under the windowsill. Eleanor stood in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at the empty spot on the desk where the flash drive used to be. "They knew exactly what to take," she said. "They didn't even touch the cash jar or the laptop," I added. "They only wanted the evidence." Eleanor didn't reply. Her lips pressed into a line, her eyes clouded with something deeper than anger. I wasn't sure if it was fear or the absence of it. I sent another text to Officer Hayes, attaching a photo of the torn drawer and the note that had been left behind. "They broke in. Flash drive's gone." He responded within minutes. "You need to come in. We're escalating." That afternoon, we drove to the courthouse in the next town over. Hayes met us in the parking lot, already holding a binder full of documents under one arm. His badge glinted under the sharp noon sun. He didn't bother with greetings. "Someone filed an injunction to freeze your grandmother's bank account yesterday." "What?" Eleanor's voice broke. "They listed her as mentally compromised, filed under emergency protection orders, signed by Claire." My blood boiled. "They're trying to discredit her before the case even begins." Hayes nodded grimly. "It's a desperate move, but a dangerous one. If a judge believes it, they could appoint a guardian to control everything." Eleanor didn't say anything, but her shoulders rose, slow and stiff. "I want to fight this," she said, voice steady. "I want it on record. I am of sound mind. They can't steal that from me, too." We followed Hayes inside, where a clerk printed the motion paperwork. Claire's signature was there, bold and smug. "She's lying," Eleanor whispered. Hayes nodded. "We'll contest it, but until then, your accounts are frozen." The weight of it all hit me at once. No access to her savings, no money for groceries, and no way to prove what had been on that flash drive. Unless... "I backed it up," I said suddenly. 3 weeks ago. I copied everything to my cloud." Eleanor turned to me. "You did?" I nodded. I didn't trust them. Something told me to keep a second copy. Hayes exhaled. Send me the link tonight. We can submit the originals to the judge before the hearing. Back at the cottage, I watched Eleanor move through the house like it was unfamiliar, like every photo frame might betray her next. They never wanted me to be anything but useful, she said quietly, standing at the kitchen sink. Now that I'm not, they want me silent. I stood beside her. You're not alone. She looked up at me. I know that now. That night, I uploaded every file from the flash drive to a secure drive and sent the folder to Hayes. Receipts, signatures, audio recordings, the email with the subject line, "Use Ethan if you have to." I couldn't stop shaking after I clicked send, but it wasn't fear, it was fury, because they tried to use me to destroy the one person who had never betrayed me, and they still thought they could win. They were wrong. The hearing was set for the following Friday. We had 5 days to prepare, but the threats didn't stop. On Monday, our mailbox was smashed in. No note this time, just a mess of bent metal and tire tracks in the dirt. On Tuesday, someone called Eleanor's landline and let it ring 27 times before hanging up. On Wednesday, someone slashed the back tires of my car. And on Thursday, Claire sent a formal legal notice. If Eleanor continues to harass the family, legal action will follow. The irony nearly made me laugh, but Eleanor didn't laugh. She just opened her old cedar chest and pulled out a small velvet-lined box. Inside was a stack of photographs bound by a yellowed ribbon. Family photos, back when things were different. She handed one to me. It was from 1986. Eleanor standing beside a younger version of Robert holding baby Claire. They weren't always this way, she said. I stared at the photo. They changed, I said. She nodded, but I didn't. And I believed her. Friday arrived, gray and cold, a strange shift for mid-August. We wore our best clothes, Eleanor in a navy blazer, me in a borrowed button-down that still smelled like cedar. As we entered the courthouse, I caught sight of them, Robert, Claire, and Mark, sitting in the hallway. They looked up, then quickly away. Hayes met us at the double doors. They filed an objection, he whispered, trying to delay. Can they? They'll try, but we're ready. Before the judge called the case, I stepped into the bathroom to splash water on my face. As I dried off, my phone buzzed. An anonymous number. I opened the message. It was a photo, blurry, taken from a distance. Eleanor, standing at her kitchen window. The caption read, "We see you." I nearly dropped the phone. When I returned to the courtroom, Eleanor glanced up. "What is it?" she asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because if they were still watching us now, then the final strike wasn't far off. The moment I sat back down beside Eleanor, my hands still damp from the sink, I could feel it. The shift in the air. Something was coming. I didn't show her the photo. Not yet. But the echo of it clung to me like the scent of smoke. Unseen, but unmistakable. Across the courtroom, Robert leaned in toward Claire. Their mouths barely moved, but their eyes flicked toward us twice. I knew then they were nervous. Good. The judge entered 5 minutes later, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that demanded stillness. She adjusted her glasses, took a long look at both parties, and called the session to order. Claire's lawyer moved first, arguing that Eleanor, due to recent cognitive decline, was no longer capable of managing her affairs, citing odd behavior, emotional instability, and lack of understanding of legal matters. Every sentence made my fists tighten. Then Hayes stood. He countered with signed medical evaluations from Eleanor's physician. Recent, clear, conclusive, mental clarity intact. He submitted our digital files, date-stamped, corroborated by Eleanor's prior consent. He read aloud the forged signature findings. He laid it all bare. The judge listened without interruption, nodding slowly, eyes scanning every document handed to her. Then it happened. Claire stood up, unprompted. I need to say something, she blurted. Her lawyer reached for her arm, but she shrugged it off. I didn't want any of this, she said. Robert told me it was already done, that Mom had signed off. I just went along because I didn't want to be the one who ruined things. Things like what? The judge asked. Claire's face flushed. The deal, the inheritance, the house. She turned toward Eleanor. You were never supposed to find out. Eleanor didn't move, didn't blink. Claire looked like she might collapse under the weight of her own guilt. But then Robert stood. "She's lying," his voice cut like a blade. "She's only saying this to protect herself. She knew. We all knew. And you?" He pointed at me, eyes wild. "You're the puppet. You think you're fighting for justice? You're just clinging to a woman who couldn't even raise her own kids right." That did it. Eleanor stood, slowly, carefully, her spine straight, her hands trembling at her sides. "I may not have been perfect," she said, voice low but clear. "But I never stole, I never lied, and I never, ever abandoned my family for $1. Robert's mouth twitched. The judge held up a hand. "Enough. Sit." The room fell silent again. Then the judge turned to me. "Mr. Carter, I understand you've been the primary contact between your grandmother and the investigating officer. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." She nodded. "And you were also the recipient of the original threat letters?" "Yes." "Do you have any of them with you today?" I reached into my folder and pulled them out, sealed in plastic, just like Hayes instructed. She examined them closely, frowning. "These are disturbing," she said, "and, at least on their surface, point to an effort to intimidate a witness." Hayes stepped forward again. "Your Honor, we also obtained recent security footage from a neighbor's outdoor camera. It confirms unauthorized entry into Mrs. Carter's home 2 days ago." Gasps echoed across the courtroom. The judge nodded slowly. "I'll be issuing a temporary protection order, effective immediately." Claire's face went white. Robert cursed under his breath. Then the judge turned back to Eleanor. "Mrs. Carter, are you prepared to submit your own statement, under oath?" Eleanor didn't flinch. "Yes." She rose again, steadier this time, and took the stand. Her voice, fragile yet firm, walked the courtroom through every detail. The $27,000 she thought was for a family vacation, the ticket that never existed, the look in Robert's eyes at the airport, the silence that followed. By the time she finished, the room had changed. No one breathed, no one moved, and even Claire looked like she wanted to disappear. Then the judge leaned back, took off her glasses, and said, "We will reconvene in 72 hours with a final decision. Until then, this court grants full protective oversight to Mrs. Carter, revokes the temporary claim against her financial rights, and seals this case from further manipulation." The gavel struck. But as people rose to leave, I felt something shift again. It wasn't over. Outside the courthouse, I stepped aside and finally showed Eleanor the photo I'd received. She stared at it for a long time. "That window," she said. "That's the back kitchen." I nodded. "No one ever walks behind the house," she whispered. My heart dropped. That meant whoever took it wasn't just passing by. They'd been on our property, maybe more than once. We returned to the car, but before I could open the door, a figure stepped out from behind the concrete pillar at the edge of the parking lot. It was Mark. His face pale, his shirt half untucked, something in his hand, a piece of paper. I stepped between him and Eleanor instinctively. He raised both hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone." "Then what do you want?" "To give you this," he said, handing me the page. I glanced down and froze. It was a printout of a wire transfer from Robert's business account to someone named David Mercer. "Who's this?" Mark swallowed hard. "He's not a lawyer. He's not even legit. He's the one Robert hired to handle things if Eleanor didn't cooperate." I blinked. "You mean—" Mark nodded slowly. "If she fought back, he'd make her disappear." And just like that, everything changed. I stared at the name on the wire transfer again. David Mercer, the man behind the threats, the break-in, the pictures, hired muscle hiding behind business suits and fake legal threats, and Robert had paid him to handle Eleanor if she got in the way. Eleanor was silent beside me, but her fingers clutched her purse strap like she was holding on for dear life. The wind in the parking lot whipped around us, loud and sharp, and for a long moment none of us moved. Then I looked up at Mark. "How do I find him?" "He works out of the city, used to be private security. Now he freelances, quiet jobs, no paper trail." He hesitated. "But I have an address." I took it. And that night I drove 2 hours without telling Eleanor where I was going. She thought I was meeting Hayes. I wasn't. The place was a small office building, run down, tucked behind a gas station off I-87. Third floor, room 304. The lights were off. But I knocked anyway. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Then I slipped the note Robert had left. Next time she falls, under the door. A second later, I heard a chair scrape across the floor. Then footsteps. The door cracked open. A man in a black jacket, square jaw, cold eyes. "You're Ethan." Not a question. "Who paid you?" I asked. "To threaten her? To erase her?" He smirked. "You're in over your head, kid." I stepped closer. "You think I came here alone?" He hesitated. "I sent your name and this address to Officer Hayes. If I don't text him in 10 minutes, he'll be at your doorstep." His jaw clenched. "Get out," he growled. I didn't move. "Leave Eleanor alone. I swear to God." Before I could finish, he grabbed my shirt and shoved me against the wall. But I was ready. Pulled the pepper spray from my pocket and hit him square in the eyes. He howled, staggering back, and I bolted down the stairs without looking back. By the time I got to the car, I was shaking. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything crashing down at once. He was real. They really hired him. And now it was all going to end. The final hearing was 3 days later. Robert didn't show up. Neither did Claire. Mark did, sat in the back, quiet, alone. Hayes submitted the wire transfer records. My statement, the threats, photos of the vandalism, the stolen flash drive. The judge listened, nodded, took her time, then she ruled. Eleanor's rights, fully restored. The land, returned under her name. The charges, escalated for Robert and Claire, now formally under criminal investigation for fraud, elder exploitation, and conspiracy. As the courtroom emptied, Eleanor turned to me. "You did this," she whispered. "We did." Her hand found mine, and for the first time since this all began, she looked lighter. Like the weight had finally shifted off her shoulders and back onto the ones who put it there. In the weeks that followed, the house grew quiet again, but not the lonely kind. It was a calm we hadn't known in a long time. We planted new marigolds in the front garden. Eleanor reopened her cookbook, the one with the gravy-stained pages and handwritten notes in the margins, and I took a job nearby, part-time, just to stay close. The black car never came back, neither did the threats. Claire sent a letter, typed, unsigned, full of excuses. Eleanor read it once, then burned it. Robert's name stayed in the news. Charges mounting, associates disappearing, his empire crumbling, and the final mystery, the deed transfer, the secret land? We sold it, not for revenge, but to build something new. Eleanor used the money to start a foundation for seniors who'd been defrauded by their own families. She named it Homeward Truth. And I stayed. Because sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about healing what they tried to break, and showing them that they didn't succeed. So what did I learn from all this? That silence protects no one. That blood doesn't always mean loyalty. And that when someone tries to erase you, they're terrified of your voice. But the truth, it never stays buried. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig. Thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. And if you love stories about dark family secrets, justice, and unexpected redemption, check out the next one. It's already waiting for you.